Alright everyone, and welcome back. In today's video we're going to be showing you how to change the thermal pads and paste on a Zotac Rtx 3090 OC Trinity edition. This is going to be one of many videos over the next couple weeks that I release showing how to change thermal pads and paste on different kinds of graphics cards. So if that sounds interesting, make sure you hit the thumbs up button and don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Here at Crypto Insight Mining we try to do videos at least every other day, if not every day, and they range from being in the farm to doing thermal pad and paste replaces to just talking about my personal opinions. So I won't waste any more of your time. We're just going to get right into it here. So this is the rig we're looking at. We're looking at rig 4. As you can see, there are three 3090s right here, and then there's a 3060 Ti. We're going to ignore these two and this top one. We're just going to look at this middle one right here. As you can see, the VRAM temp is at 110 degrees Celsius, which is not good, but now that I'm pointing out that it's at 110, that'll lead me into the first couple questions and comments that I get constantly about these cards. Because if you follow the channel and you've been watching me for any length of time, you know that I really like 3090s, and those are pretty much the only cards that I buy. So as we see this temperature right here, I would like to answer a few questions. The number one, I guess it's not a question, it's more or less a statement I would like to say is 3090s run really hot. I feel like we all know this. I feel like it's very obvious, but I would just like to state that. They do run very hot. They run hotter than all the other cards, so you really can't compare the temps or the numbers from other cards to 3090s. Now, a good example of what I'm talking about here is you can see the VRAM temp on my 3060 Ti is comfortably at 49 degrees Celsius, and then all my other ones are above 100. Now, what I do want to say is as you can see, this number's in the red. There are some numbers like this one that's in the yellow, and then there's numbers like this one down here that's in the green. Those are basically like, let's call them levels that NiceHash has predetermined as being bad, okay, and great. Now, they kind of do a broad over the whole line of graphics cards numbers. Now, these numbers are really good for 3060 Ti's and 3070s and those other cards, but this by personal opinion, I really believe that they're a little bit off for the like 3090s that do run hot all the time. So when I see them, I guess the best way to explain what I'm saying would be to just tell you guys how I do it. So I keep all of my cards on a schedule. What I usually do is at the beginning of summer and at the end of summer, I'll repad and paste. So I get about 5 months or so during the summer, and then I get about 7 months during the winter with new pads and paste on it. And what that does is it allows me to dissipate the heat way better because I know they're going to run hot. Now, during the winter, I usually try to keep my cards, I don't try to keep them, they just, it happens that way. My cards stay between like 90 and 100 degrees Celsius during the winter, and then during the summer, because of where I live here in Pennsylvania, we do have a few weeks of 95 plus degree weather every year, but most of the time it's relatively cool. So just about the rest of the year, my cards, well, during the summer, I guess, my cards will run between like 100 and 108. Now, when I start seeing my cards, like this one, get to 108 or 110, I have a whiteboard that I'll usually write down the card and the rig on, and it's something to keep my eyes on over the course of the next week or 2 weeks. And if I ever see the temperature spike to 110 or 112 specifically, that's like okay, within the next couple days I need to change my pads. And that's where we're at with this card. Yesterday it spiked to 112 a couple times, and now it seems to be pegged right around 108 to 110. So this card needs to be repadded and paste, and that's what we're going to do today. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to run down to the shed. I'm going to unplug all 3 of these other cards so we can just have this one card on the rig so we can see what's going on with it after I repad and paste. And I'll bring it up here, I'll get it on the workbench, and I'll get the camera all turned back on. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to pause this, and I'll see you all there in 1 minute. Alright everyone, so we got the card all unhooked, and I got it here on the workbench. We're going to start taking it apart, and like I said, I might answer a couple questions throughout this, and I'll definitely try to explain the best of my abilities as to exactly what I'm doing to make this very easy for anybody who has to do this as well. So the first thing I want to do is you got these 6 screws right here. You got these 4. They have springs on them, and then you have these 2 other ones down into here. That'll be the first ones that I take out. Actually going to switch to my regular screwdriver. Sometimes the handheld one just works a little bit better for these tight spots. So you want to break all these loose. Very careful not to lose any of these bolts. I should have probably went over it before I got into this graphics card. You really only need one kind of pads to be able to do this graphics card. You really only need 2mm thick pads. I'm not going to get into it in this video, but there's actually a second set of pads that are under the frame bracket, whatever you want to call it, that goes around the card. I'll show you that later in this video, but it actually takes 3mm thick pads, but I only change that every year, maybe every 18 months. It really doesn't get too worn down or too messed up, so you really don't have to change it. So I'm going to set these 3mm pads over here because we really only need to focus on the 2mm thicks. So once we got this here, you can actually pull this card apart just like that. Careful not to mess it up. So set it down, and now I always undo the wires so that this way there's no way for me to mess them up, because I'm always so scared. I don't know if anybody else, whenever they take these GPUs apart, but I'm always so scared that I'm going to mess up these wires and these connector pieces, and the fans or the heat sinks or any of this stuff isn't going to work the way it should. So okay, those ones. Card is very dirty. Like I said, I will show how I clean these as soon as we get all these parts pulled out of here. And this black one here is actually the one that I like the least. And every card I take apart for these Zotacs, it never wants to come out. Making me look like a liar on camera. That one came out pretty simple. So the first thing I will do is I will take some isopropyl alcohol. I like the 70 proof stuff. 70%, not proof. What is it? What am I talking about? Liquor. So dab a little bit on here like this. Then you can actually wipe all this thermal paste, this little bit of thermal paste that is left on here from them on here off. I knocked it down here on the side accidentally, this chunk, so. Okay, there you go. Got that all cleaned up. Give this guy a good clean. Alright, and then we will leave this one just like this until we go and turn on the air compressor, and we'll give this a good dusting. So we're going to set this guy right up here to the side, actually, and we'll take care of this. So this is the next board that you're going to work on, and you have these screws right here, all these little screws going around here. You're going to switch back to your Phillips screwdriver, and these are the screws you got to worry about. You got to take out all these. I think there's 6 of them. Keep those separate because they are different than the first ones that you took out. One. I'm actually going to use my electric boy here. I missed one right here. I knew there was one more. So, once you get all these screws out of here, you can actually take this back plate off. Careful pulling it off. Sometimes it doesn't feel like it wants to come off. So, I want to get the rest of these screws out of here. Of course, the one that I go to record a video is the one that I have the most problems with. So there's that one, there's that one, there's that one. There it is right there. Knew there was one more. So yeah, there's 6 screws on that plate for this. So we're going to set this guy over here. What I'll do is I'll turn this over. Take a napkin again with a little isopropyl alcohol. Some people like to use Q-tips. I do use those, and I will show you here in 1 second. But for this section, I will just dab some of this iso on a napkin, fold it over, make it real small, and wipe all these chips down. You can see the thermal pads that were starting to get worn out. They were sticking to these chips, so you can scrub all that off, I guess. Then turn it over, and can actually wash off all this thermal paste on here. Make sure you get the sides real well. Cool. Now, most of the time the thermal pads will stick to the heat sink, so we can pull all these off. If I can get them off. Of course, the video that I record on is going to be the one that has the most problems. So here we go. That one came off. Alright, now let's see if we can get this last one off here. Alright, cool. Okay. Got one more little guy down here now. A little piece of, little tip that I can say if it's your first time changing cards, really take your time. The very first time I changed thermal pads, I actually forgot one of these little tiny pieces, one of these little chips, and they're really, really easy to forget. So I will go over all that here in a minute whenever I'm repadding all these. I'll show you all the little small chips that are in these Zotacs. So it's all nice and cleaned. Pretty much ready for the air compressor. I will set this right here. Now, let's look at this back plate. So the back plate, peel these thermal pads off. Alright. And then, once again, you can clean up all this oil on here with a little bit of this isopropyl alcohol. Try to give it a nice wipe. Wipe the back. Alright, now we're going to go dust all these components off with the air compressor real quick. So give me 1 minute, we'll do that. Alright, so here we go. We're going to give these all a nice quick dusting. That one's real easy, but these are the ones that really matter. You want to, once again, don't blast it with really, really hard air. Go little by little. Try to get all that dust out of there. And this is the one, this is the big one. You really want to look at all that dust. There's lots of dust that came out. There's actually a piece of a thermal pad that I forgot about on there. So cool. All right, we'll go back to the test bench. These are really nice and clean, and we're going to get them repadded. All right, so we're back at the test bench here, at the workbench. Let's get everything all hooked back up. Now, the one thing I do want to show you before I start repadding this is remember whenever I was talking about the 3mm pads, this is the bracket that I'm talking about. This whole plastic, feels like plastic, it might be metal. I think it's metal, actually. This metal bracket comes off, and there's actually thermal pads running right underneath this one and running right underneath this one. And how you take that off is there's 3 screws right here, and then there's 2 screws right here. Now, if you do decide to take this off to change those pads, just keep in mind that these 3 screws are different than these 2 screws, and these 2 types of screws are different than all of these screws. So if you're only changing the 2mm pads, there's only 3 types of screws to keep track of. But as soon as you start changing out these 3mm pads, there's now 5 types of screws to keep track of. So just make sure you either videotape yourself or draw yourself a map on a piece of paper. Come back to this video so you know what screws go where. I will be making a video in the future showing how to replace those 3mm pads. So I'm going to get these all good to go. So on the back plate here, all you have is these 4 parts to worry about. You got these 2, this one, and then this piece right here. So we're going to grab ourselves some 2mm pads, I usually try to like lay it on here. Now, there's not really, you don't have to be exact. I know some people like to say that you have to be exact with it. I don't like to leave much hang over the edge, but if I do leave a little hang over the edge, I'm not exactly worried about it either. So let me take this off of here. Set that piece over there. We can use it on the bottom chip. So I'll usually do smooth to smooth, and when I mean that, I don't know if this is correct or not, and I'm sure it varies depending upon who you ask, but if you look at these thermal pads, it's smooth on this side, and then there's like a grid type surface on this side. I try to do the grid type surface up, and then I try to do the smooth onto the chips to get maximum contact. So move on to the next one. We can do this little chip here, which you can see it's going to use about that much. I don't press very hard. I know you can hear it rattling on the table. I don't press very hard. I just give it a little press, so this way whenever I go to put the plate on, in case if I have to re-pull it back off, they'll stick to the chips and they won't stick to the plate. I'll explain that more here in 1 second whenever I go to do this. Cool. Video is going to probably end up being a little bit longer than what I wanted it to be, but beggars can't be choosers. I feel pretty confident that I can just cut this to size without measuring it. So, cut, cut, cut. Just take a little bit off. Some people I've seen online like to use scissors. Some people like to use razor blades. I use both. I do have a pair of scissors here. I do use both. It just depends what seems to work better at the time. And right now, a razor blade seems to be doing just fine. So, got that all together. We're going to get this back plate hooked on. Let's see here. So, wire goes down here. It'll go right into this spot. I'll usually just lay it on there like this. Get that wire up and around, and then you can lay it on and match up all the screws. You can match up the 4 screws right here with the holes. And all the other spots are matched up as well. Now, be careful not to over tighten. This is a really touchy subject. I've seen a lot of people talk about how tight you should make your screws. There's pros and cons to doing your screws really tight, and there's pros and cons to doing them really tight. Now, the cons are that you're going to overstrip the screws. You're going to strip the, I don't know what you would call the part of the graphics card that's threaded for these screws, but you could strip that out. But you also want to make sure that they are pressed hard enough that they're going to make contact with the thermal pads and they're going to press up against, or else if they're not making contact, then it's really not doing anything, and your temps might honestly not even come down. I've definitely seen that being the #1 thing. If you ever do a thermal pad or a paste replacement and the temps do not come down, it may be because you didn't screw down the back plate or the inside hard enough and it's not making contact. So screws down, and one more right here. Can't get this screw on this thing. No, I've said it before, but just as a pro tip, if you don't have a magnetic precision screwdriver kit, get yourself one. They're really, really cheap, whether they're online or you get one at Lowe's or the Home Depot. They're really cheap. So you take this wire and you're going to push it back in. Just make sure it's clicked all the way in. Perfect. White and white, black and black. Really simple. So the next thing that we're going to work on here is we're going to work on putting pads here, 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 here. So there's 4 sets of pads. Then you also need to remember that there's a really small chip right up here in the corner that needs to be padded as well. So let's get these all padded real quick. Cut that one a little short, but it's all right. We got all these scraps over here, these little pieces. We can easily stick a little piece on. That's why I like this stuff. It's like clay. It's really fun to play with sometimes. Boom, done. Actually, I'm going to shave off a little bit here on the end just to make this a little bit more even. So let's see here. Cut it a little short last time. We won't take as much off. Little press. And let's get this one on as well. Then you just got to do the 2 small chips, and this side is done. We'll apply some paste, and we're about ready to be putting the fans back on here. So, whoops, pieces a little bit too big. Perfect. Okay, this might actually be perfect for the small chip. So there's this one down here at the bottom. Then there's this one, I won't touch it, but there's this one right here. But you want to make sure it takes the smallest. And this is actually the very first time that I did these cards. I actually forgot about this little guy, and I had to go back and redo it. Sometimes it helps if you can get it, if you can do it. Perfect. Once again, precision screwdriver set. Most of them come with these tweezers. Perfect for this. So those are all covered. Now the only thing we really got left to do is we're going to apply some thermal paste to this guy. Now, not sponsored by anything, and I don't like to push certain products, but I do tend to use the thermal alright pads, and I try to use the thermal grizzly paste. The paste is very expensive. I believe this container of paste is right around $100. I think if you look at it on Amazon, it's around $90, $92. So if you get this stuff, it comes with these little appliers, these little spatulas, whatever you want to call them. They work very well for applying thermal paste to these guys. So you want to get yourself a nice glob. You don't want to go too much, but you want to make sure you put enough on there to get contact. And you got to remember, it's the beginning of summer now here where I am, so it's going to be a solid 5 months before I open these cards back up again and put paste in here. So you definitely want to make sure you put a bunch on. Now, this is another really, really touchy subject. A lot of people are very particular about how they put their paste on their cards. I do cover the entire chip with paste, and I do lay it thick all over. I lay it about the same thickness everywhere, but I do lay it really thick all over. I don't know if you can see exactly how much paste I put on there, and then I will probably honestly do another little glob too. I know some people will probably attack me in the comments and saying that I'm putting way too much. but it works for me. It keeps my cards cool. Like I said, they are 3090s. They do run unbelievably hot, and you want to do whatever. If a couple extra dollars worth of thermal paste keeps them cool, then that is money well spent. So that's about how much thermal paste I'd put on. I don't know if you can see this from that camera angle, but there is a healthy glob there. Next, what you're going to want to do is it's real simple. You're just going to take this and flip it over. Make sure I have it turned the right way. So it's going to go on this way. Put it this way. You're going to want to reattach all the wires now. So once again, black and black, white and white. This is the wire I don't like taking it out, and I don't like putting it back in. Sorry if my head is in the way and everyone can't see. This is always the one that I have troubles with. It's like they made the wire just barely long enough to get down to where you need it to go. Jeez. And like every other time, I cannot seem to get it. There we go. Finally. Struggling there for a second. Riding the struggle bus on that one. Alright, so maybe it's just me because I'm really careful, but I always try to watch the wires on this side when you're flipping it back over. So once you get it back together, you can give it a little press, turn it over, make sure all your bolts are lined up. So you got the 4, as you can see right there. Okay, just wanted to make sure there was good contact. So once we got this all put back together, you can set it down, and this is where you can put all your screws back in now. So and just like when you broke these free at the beginning of the video I showed you, you don't want to screw them in all the way at the same time. You want to, I don't know if any of you have ever done tires on a car, but you want to kind of, you obviously can't go on a star pattern on this, but you want to kind of go little by little. So I'll screw those in about halfway, and then I will go around and around and do them the rest of the way. And that's it. Card is completely cleaned, padded, and pasted. And it's ready to go for 5 months through the summer here in Pennsylvania. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go put this back on the rig. I've thought about it. I'm not going to unplug the rest of the cards. I'm just going to plug this in. It's pretty easy to see which one it is. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to run down there, get that all plugged in, and I will see you guys all at my desktop. Give me 1 minute. Alright everyone, so we are back here at the desktop. I got the graphics card plugged in, and it's been running for about 45 minutes, so it has stabilized. It seems to have stabilized right in between 102 and 104, and it was at 100 there for a brief minute before it popped up. So it is about 6:30 in the evening, so it is cooling down here. So I do believe that I fixed the issue. Like as you see in the beginning of the video, it was popping up right between like 110 and 112. So now it should be pretty stable around 100 to 104, which is right where I run my cards at all summer. So hopefully this answered any questions that anybody had. If I forgot to mention anything, or there's any questions that I didn't answer, please feel free to put them down in the comment section. I try my best, me and my wife, to answer all of the questions that you guys ask. So with that being said, I will see you in the next one. Have a good one and stay safe.